All right. Hi, Corey and Batzi. Thank you for joining me here today on Vonvo.com to discuss the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Just wanted to start off with a quick introduction and go over some of the quick ground rules regarding Vonvo. Um, so today is January 5th. I'm Max Ringelheim from Vonvo.com. I just wanted to inform you right now that this conversation is being recorded, and once the conversation is over, we'll be uploading it to our YouTube channel. Is that okay with both of you?
Yep, that's fine with me.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then next, just quickly to go over some of the quick ground rules. On Vonvo, we're not looking for there to be any personal attacks against anyone, no insults or racist remarks, no belittling, and we just want the conversation to be both civil and valuable. Can you guys both abide by those rules?
Yes.
Certainly.
All right, great. So let's jump right into the conversation. Corey, would you mind just telling our viewers a little bit about yourself and give them a bit of a background regarding who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Canadian originally. I moved to Israel the first time it was about 20 years ago. And I've lived in Israel off and on for the last 20 years. When I was last in Canada, I did an MA in conflict studies. I wanted to understand the dynamics that I saw happen here within Israeli society and Palestinian society. And now that I'm back in Israel, I didn't have very much luck finding a job in something that I was interested in doing, something regarding the conflict. So I decided to go back to school. So I'm doing a doctorate in political science at university, and I'm looking at Palestinian culture and conflict.
Great. And Batzi, would you mind just giving people a quick background of yourself as well?
Yes, I'm a native Israeli. We call it Sabra. I lived out of Israel for 32 years. Went to study in the USA, undergraduate, graduate school, UC Berkeley, and to New Zealand for 10 years, and to the UK, lived some time in Australia and Canada, and now I'm back in Israel, have been for the last 2.5 years, and I'm very involved in Israeli Hasbara, primarily because I got to see Israel from the outside, and I realized what we're looking in and felt that I could contribute. And here I am.
Great. Great. Thank you so much. So, Batzi, I know I told you about this before. We were interested in having more of a story-oriented discussion. I believe Corey has, a bunch, for us to discuss regarding, this conflict. And, I wanted to start off with that, Corey, in terms of some of the things you do. I think I could be wrong, but did someone tell me that you do a lot of personal interviewing of both Israelis and Palestinians? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it was a project that actually started about a year ago. Actually, it really started about 2 years ago during the tent protests that were happening in around Israel, and I would at the same time I would get into these debates, arguments with people outside of Israel who didn't know Israeli society very well, and I realized that they had what they knew about Israeli society and Palestinian society was based on a lot of mythology. It was based on a lot of skewed facts. There was generally a kernel of truth to them, but it was built up with exaggeration, and they tended to always focus on the extreme left or the extreme right, depending on which side they came from. And I'm talking about people who are both pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli. People tend to pick a side and go with it. And it bothered me that none of what I would hear outside of Israel about Israelis matched my experiences. So I wanted to find a way to show what average Israelis think and feel. And in an argument with someone who was telling me, who had never been to Israel, had never met an Israeli, but they were telling me what Israelis were like, I said, okay, you know what, I have a video camera, and I'm just going to go to the streets of Tel Aviv, and I'll ask people your question, what they think. And that's what I did. And it turned into this project where people from outside ask a question from Israelis, and I just go out and look for average people and I try to make it as random as possible. I try to get out of Tel Aviv when I can to get other views. And I also have gone to the West Bank to do the same thing. Just a little bit harder to get to the West Bank.
Right. And so, I mean, in terms of so most of the people that you would hear from, were basically just far right wingers of both sides, correct? Or that's where you were trying to get onto to interview.
Well, people would focus on they would want to prove their point or what they thought is the right goal. Whether they believe that Israel is right about everything, or they believe Israel is wrong about everything, or Palestinians are right about everything, wrong about everything, and so they would give me as their proof, a YouTube video of an Israeli who is saying that Israel is a corrupt apartheid state. And there was one that floats around of I think he's a Moroccan guy who talks about how he feels he's a second-class citizen. And I'm Canadian. I'm not Moroccan, but I'm around Moroccan Jews in Israel all the time, and I've never heard that. So that's just an example that I'm sure there are people who come from all walks of life who have a story, who feel that their story is the truth. But if it doesn't really match what the majority really think, I'm not sure why it floats around in cyberspace, creating these false stories about both Israelis and Palestinians.
Great.
So I'm looking at what do average people think.
Great. And so, Batzi, I mean, have you heard about any of these interviews?
Okay, no, I have not, and certainly I've not been one of those people you interviewed, and you're welcome to address me with any questions that you are asked to ask Israelis. But just one point you made there, and you said that a lot of, or somebody was complaining that Moroccan Jews feel like second-class citizens in Israel. I wonder why Israel is singled out. I lived, as I mentioned to you, in a few countries. Every country that I've lived in, I felt that some citizens were more equal than others. All of them were born there. So we're talking discrimination. Discrimination is very much part of human nature. People are discriminated on a daily basis everywhere you go. It's discriminated to be on color, on origin, on creed, on sexual preferences. It happens. That's human nature. I wonder why they always talk about Israel as being, so to speak, the only discriminatory nation in the world. And why would they address questions like this about Israel? Because we're letting the world develop this image about Israel, that Israel is becoming an apartheid state, that Israel is a racist state. Just last week, I heard people making those accusations. There was one lady that was interviewed, and I heard people making these accusations that Zionists are racist, Zionists are, horrible people. They discriminate against anybody who is not Jewish.
Batzi,
I just say, yes.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Can you just either speak a little bit louder, or where your cord is for your headphone? If you put that up to you, that's where your microphone is, and if you put that up to your mouth, it'll be a little louder.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah. That's louder. Great.
Okay. So, do you want me to repeat briefly what I just said?
Yeah, sure. You can sum what you just set up for sure.
Okay. Corey was talking about this Moroccan guy who was claiming that there is discrimination in Israel because he's originated from Morocco. I'm saying I've lived in several places around the world. Discrimination is so much part of human nature, regardless of where they are. It's just our nature to always find someone who is lesser than us, whether it's because of their political beliefs, whether it's because of their color, creed, sexual preferences. So, but I'm just wondering why the world is so preoccupied with Israel being a racist, discriminatory state, something that's different. We Israelis are human beings just like anybody else in the world. Yes, you will find your discrimination because we might be Jews, we might be Zionists, but we're still human beings. So to try and single Israel out as the only country that is so much the subject of the world's preoccupation with racism or discrimination is really bothersome to me. And I think by us going around asking people those kinds of questions, we're only making the issue even bigger than it is.
Corey, would you like to respond to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say. That's something that also I wonder as well. I guess I have a few thoughts that don't necessarily connect to one another. From experience outside of Israel and Canada and other countries I've traveled in, and even meeting Muslims and Arabs, where that's sort of the focus, most people actually don't really think that much about Israel. I think from here we think people do more than they do, or we're more. I guess when we hear something that's anti-Israel, we who are Jews feel a little hypersensitive about it. So, sort of the good news is most of the world just doesn't really care all that much about the issues. I think on the other hand, the people who do care, there's a lot of people who are very emotionally invested in this conflict from one side or the other, and they've romanticized one side or the other, and they fully support one side over the other, which always seems ridiculous to me. But and I think that they make a lot of noise, and we give them much too much focus. And I wish those people who have this sort of romantic infatuation with either Israelis or Palestinians and really want to support them, they would find much more constructive ways rather than to degrade the other side, whoever they are. Now, there's very definitely, I comes through in the videos and from my experience, there are really negative things that people think and do about the other side. It happens, absolutely. I don't think it's, maybe it's a little bit more here because there's an active conflict where people are living it daily and hearing about each other daily, or hearing about the negative opinions of the other side daily. So but I've experienced similar issues when living in Canada between First Nations and European Canadians, between Black and White Canadians, immigrants, non-immigrants. It's just not as much in focus. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict tends to be much more a focus for some people.
So Batzi, go ahead and respond, Batzi.
Yeah, I agree with you with the issue of hypersensitivity, but I think it is a common trait of most minorities. In America, I remember Black people coming to me and saying, sometimes I wonder if somebody says if they speak to me the way they, because I'm Black, or is because they really feel that that's the answer that I deserve. And I felt it with Maoris in New Zealand. And I guess it's just human nature, but I don't want to take too much credit for being Jewish, but I think Jews have been the center, or rather the focus of many nations in the world. I wish they weren't. I wish we weren't. As Fiddler on the Roof said to God, I know we're the chosen people, but can you not choose somebody else for a change? I wish the world would have chosen somebody else for a change, because I think the world is both fascinated and threatened by the Jews. According to all laws of nature, the Jews should have been eradicated by now. We are kind of a walking apparition in the world. We have defied all the laws of nature in any way that they could. They tried to destroy us, whether it was physically, spiritually, religiously, in any form. And here we're walking around, and not only are we around, we are thriving, we're strong, we managed to survive despite daily efforts to try and eradicate us. We contribute greatly to world civilization. I think we're an enigma. I think the world is fascinated with us because, as I said, we defy all laws of nature. And in a way, the world also is engaging a lot in projection. I've read a lot about the German society, what Germany has turned into nowadays. A lot of Germans are accusing Israel of being a state. In a way, it's projection. It makes the German nation, although I don't blame the present generation in Germany, but it would make them feel a little bit lighter, a little bit easier about the guilt that they have been carrying, not of their own fault, of course. But, if we say that the Jews act like Nazis, oh boy, do I feel better about that. So yes, I don't want to say that we are the center of world attention, but naturally, because we're Jewish and we have persisted in history despite the disappearance of other nations, of other empires around, I think the world regards us as some kind of an enigma, and they're trying to figure us out.
Corey, do you have a follow up to that? Otherwise, I'll come in and ask a specific.
I don't know. Well, one thing that is through, I've never heard anyone say this, so maybe maybe it is original. I have no idea. But through just studying conflict in general, I think we tend to be, as human beings, we tend to mimic, and we go with like the things we already know. So the only thing I could add to the whole issue of anti-Semitism is because it has been going on for so long. I mean, Jews are actually, maybe you could kind of call us the first minority. We were the first minority in Europe. I mean, there were wars between different kingdoms, but we were the first people who sort of moved through as foreigners, so the first immigrants. And I think people tend to focus on things that they already know. So it's, if you already hear, oh, the Jews did this, repeating the idea of killing Christ or something like that, or Jews are money grubbers. And if you sort of heard that through history, it tends to build on itself. So you just sort of transfer it from one issue to another. That's the only other thing I can add. I haven't heard anyone actually say that, but that's my impression.
Right. So Corey, though, from Batzi, obviously she has strong opinions relating to what her stance is. How do you think from all the people that you've spoken with, I guess especially on the Palestinian side, what is their interpretation of what do you think, from your experience, what do you think their interpretation of what she has to say would be? If there was if someone that we had the other week from the West Bank was in here listening to Batzi, who did appear last week, so she did hear the other side, what do you think their responses to some of these ideas that Batzi's bringing up would be?
Okay, let me say this in two different ways. First, I'll say what their response would be likely. I'm kind of guessing because I'm not Palestinian, but likely most Palestinians, most Arabs, most Muslims will say they are not anti-Jewish, they don't hate Jews, they love the Jewish people, yada, yada, yada. But from experience, it's much grayer than that. I think that, first of all, at least in dealing with Palestinians, the word Jew, the word Israeli, and the word Zionist get intermixed. And as much as they say they're not against Jews, for example, Gazans call Israel the Jewish side. So when they're talking about coming into Israel, they're saying, "Oh, I'm on the Jewish side already." When I'm speaking to Palestinians in the West Bank, they'll mix the word Jew, Zionist, or Israeli as if it all sort of means the same. And then the times I have met people who have a lot of hate in them. Sometimes it's definitely directed at the Jews. Sometimes they try to categorize it as anti-Zionism or it being against Israelis. But again, it gets mixed together very easily. And I don't think anti-Semitism in the sense of just blind, well, part of it is blind hate, because a lot of them have never even met a Jew other than seeing soldiers from far away or maybe a settler on the road. But a lot of it is a mix of what they hear, of what they experience, and also what they hear in mosques and in the media. And that is also talks about the Jews, it talks about the Zionists, talks about the Israelis, sort of in an equal way. So as much as I know most Arabs will say they aren't anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish, and Palestinians will say that, it's much grayer than that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, go ahead, Batzi. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Batzi.
I mean, I've heard the argument, I'm not anti-Jewish, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm only anti-Zionist. And last week, I'm sorry, the quality of, I wasn't happy with the quality of my tape last week because I wasn't well prepared. So I'd just like to recap just a few points, not everything. Anybody who says that they're anti-Zionist but not anti-Semitic is just trying to fool only themselves. Because to me, and I explained it last week, to me they're one and the same. The hatred of Jews, as we all know, is anti-Semitism. I really love it when Arabs say to me, "Oh, you know, I'm also a Semite, so how could I be an anti-Semite?" Which is a bunch of baloney, and excuse my language, because that really upsets me. Anybody knows that when you talk about anti-Semitism, it's only anti-Jewish.
Well, where are
Nobody
they,
would
Batzi?
ever be fooled. I mean,
Where are they coming up with? Can you go into where they're coming up with, that claim? Where is that originating from?
because the Arabs and the Jews are both Semites. There's no question about that. I'm not disputing that. We all from this. Well, Semite is basically a sub-race. It's a language race, okay? And our languages are similar. We have a lot in common as far as the language is concerned. So yes, they are of Semitic origin. But when the term anti-Semitic came about by this German philosopher, I'm sorry, I failed to remember his name, but I believe it was the 18th century. He was referring merely to Jews. I don't think he even knew what an Arab was then, but that's not the point. The point is distinguishing between Jews and Zionists. They're one and the same, and I try to explain to people that Zionism is really the non-religious ideology of Judaism. The word Zion is mentioned in the Jewish scriptures, and I'm not saying it to substantiate my presence here. I'm not, if you recall, last week I stressed that I don't use religious arguments as proof for my presence here, but it is our tradition and no one can deny it. In our tradition, Zion is the name referred to the land of Israel, Eretz Israel, and to Jerusalem. And the name Zionism originates in Jewish sources. So it is the movement of the Jewish people to come back to, or to have a homeland. The fact that it happens to be here is another issue. We're not dealing with that. But to say that you're separating Judaism from Zionism is just a fallacy. The way I referred to it last week is anti-Semitism is kind of a virus that mutates. It started as religious anti-Semitism by the church, accusing the Jews of killing of Christ, and then it mutated into racial anti-Semitism with Hitler and racial theories of the 18th century. And nowadays, it's political anti-Semitism, which I call Zionism. So anyone who says that they love Jews but they don't like Zionists, I'm a Zionist. I'm a proud Zionist. I'll declare my Zionism. I'll carry it on my sleeve. I will tattoo it on my heart. No one will take it away from me. But to say that I am a bad person because I'm a Zionist only tells me that whoever accuses me of that is just ignorant.
Right. So I mean, Corey or Batzi, you can respond to this. Next would be like, what is where is the disconnect occurring in both of your opinions? Where people of a different point of view will say there's a difference between a Zionist in Israel and a regular Jew. What's the difference, and who's creating this difference? What are they pointing out?
Let me respond to that first. I think the issue is the idea is definition. Jews and Arabs define Zionism in completely different ways. It's very funny that, or very telling that one of the videos I did is asking Israelis, "Are you Zionist, and why?" And for Israelis, the majority they say they're Zionists, and it means that they feel pride in being Israeli. They feel it's their home. They feel like this is their country. They feel connected to the land, to the culture, to the government. They feel a connection. It's part of who they are. What was telling is that some people who responded and commented on the video said, "Isn't that funny? Israelis don't understand what a Zionist is," because for Arabs, Zionism is this idea of conquering, is this idea of displacing, of destroying the Palestinian people, of someday they have this imagined idea of Israeli Zionists conquering the Middle East. I think it says from the Tigris to the Euphrates, or from the Euphrates to the Nile, and they have proof of this and all sorts of nonsense. What they don't understand is how do Jews, Israel, and Jews outside of Israel, how do they understand Zionism? What do they mean when they say they're a Zionist? And I'm sure there are a few crazies who think, yes, we would love to have what is considered biblical Israel, parts of Jordan, I think a little bit of northern Lebanon. And there are the settlers who believe that they are doing God's work by sitting on a hill near Nablus, and they are on their land. To the majority of Israelis, it's not quite that black and white. Zionism means feeling pride, feeling Israeli, feeling part of the Israeli culture. And so and most Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims who I've spoken to have no idea of that, and they don't actually care. I find that I'm not sure if they don't believe me or it just doesn't fit with their worldview of having to get rid of Israel or get rid of Zionism in their minds. And I because I believe you deal with what the reality is. The reality is that most Israelis see Zionism as something just Jewish self-determination, having control of who we are. And I don't understand why French people or Arab people or Palestinian people or Canadians can't have that and we're told we're not allowed.
Right. No, it's very interesting.
So, if you want to say something else, go ahead.
No, I just I'm trying to find out when you said who are the people who say that those settlers on mountain in Nablus, and I really love the fact that you referred to it by. I mean, obviously we don't agree on the terminology. When you talk about the West Bank, which West Bank are you talking about? Of the N River, the Eber River in Italy? Which West Bank are you talking about? That place.
Okay, you can't. You
called Judea.
Hold on. You can't. Hold on. You can't, because my video camera isn't working, you can't see me rolling my eyes. But I accept that you see that as Judea and Samaria. I have no problem with that. And part of me, when I was in Nablus and in Itamar and in the settlements there, and yeah, I felt a connection. This is part of, in theory, my history. But there's another people there who see it differently. And part of my way of compromising is saying, okay, there's another state because I believe in Jewish self-determination and that every people, every group deserves to have a place to call home. The Palestinians see the whole land as their home and we don't belong here. I don't agree with that. But I'm willing to compromise by saying, you know what, I might call it Shechem. To me, it has that meaning. To them, it's Nablus, and it has a different. That's okay.
Why wouldn't you call?
But I don't like when we try to destroy the other sides by saying it's not a West Bank. It's not. There's no, or some people say there's no such thing as Palestinians. I see why. Why do that?
And Batzi, just talk directly into the microphone, Batzi.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I apologize. How do you think the French would feel if we called their country the eastern side of the La Manche Canal? How do you think they would have felt about that? That place has a name. It's called Judea and Samaria. Well, I'm just talking, why would Israel be any different than France? I beg your pardon?
Because it has another name to the people who also live there. And I can respect that.
They call it Palestine. They can call it Palestine. I have no problem. Let them call it Palestine. I just don't like the name West Bank. It is such a vague name. They can call it Palestine. They can call it anything. It's just the West Bank is, to me, such a vague name. Which, the West Bank of what? I mean, be specific.
Okay, I don't know why. No, because I don't understand even why we're having this discussion about what the name is. I don't really care. Call it Mars.
Well, I do think everything. No, I think a name is very
Corey,
important.
you don't think the name
where I sit.
You don't think, Corey, the name has importance? I mean, from all the people that I've been talking to, at certain points, I've found myself questioning and then ultimately asking the speakers the question does this conversation, fall down to what this land is named? You don't think that has importance, Corey?
I think it has importance because look, this is just me. I don't want to project this onto everyone. I, in my mind, have decided what Israel is, and it's within vaguely the 67 borders, because I recognize that there's another people here, and they also deserve. So, yeah, I don't think a two-state solution will actually work, but it's sort of the best hope. So, because I don't see myself as being any better or any more right than Palestinian friends who live in Nablus, they can call it Palestine. They call it the West Bank. So I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So yeah, in a sense, like I don't really care what other people call their places.
Okay. For instance, a lot of people.
Now, if they said, if people say this is Palestine, what we're in, Batzi, that bothers me. Does because that's negating who we are.
I have news for you. This place during the British Mandate, was called by both names. The original name, Eretz Israel. You know, when I decided to engage in Israeli Hasbara, I invested a lot of money in buying facts, because when I talk to people, I want to talk facts. I don't like myth. The other side sells enough myth. It's time to sell them facts. I invested money in buying coins from the British Mandate era. And you know what those coins say? Have you ever had a chance to look at one of them? Have you ever seen money? Money from. It says no, sir. It says Palestine, and in parentheses it says the Aleph Yud, which is the initials of Eretz Israel. So anybody who tells me that this place is Palestine, I have news for them. I refer to this place as Eretz Israel, and I get accused. Oh, you are an expansionist. You're a colonialist. No. Palestine, the arbitrary name given to this place by the Romans in the year 135 to add insult to injury to the truth after they had exiled them from this land, is just that. It's an arbitrary name. The original name of this place is Eretz Israel. Okay, some people call it Palestine. I respect it. I don't accept it. I respect it. But they're both areas. They were never sovereign nations. They were never states. They were never political entities. So if somebody finds it offensive that this place is called Palestine, or somebody else finds it offensive that this place is called Eretz Israel, it's their problem. It's your choice what you call this place. My choice is to call it Eretz Israel. Why did the British Mandate chose both names? The first is an original name, Eretz Israel, and the second name is an arbitrary name. But to say that there was a state here before the establishment of the State of Israel, before 1948, is a myth. It's a lie. It's disinformation. And you know how I define disinformation? It's deliberate misinformation. Misinformation can be a mistake, can be an accident, an innocent mistake. But disinformation is a deliberate form of misinformation. And I will not let anybody get away with it. I carry those coins with me wherever I go, because I want to show people that this place is also called Eretz Israel. And there is nothing wrong with calling this place Eretz Israel, just as there is nothing with calling it Palestine, because these are two names of those places. That's all.
Corey, go ahead and respond to that.
No, I have no response. I just I don't even like to have these sort of debates because I find they're pointless.
Right. So then,
you're in for a surprise. That's the whole basis. That's the whole basis for the argument. I have people pointing at the map, calling it Palestine. I was 2 years ago. I was in El Salvador. Yes, that's you're really missing the whole point of this issue. No,
I get the
conflict.
Point. I just don't see the point in. Okay. I just don't see the point in going over and over because I've had these debates for years, and I just don't. I'm not interested.
Right.
I don't. That's not my. I'm interested in what are the dynamics, what people think, what their views are, and why they do it.
Right. So Batzi.
Debating about what we call something.
These are not people's views. Of course, so that's what you're dealing with. So why are you denying it to yourself? This is the whole core of the issue. Is it Palestine or is it Eretz Israel?
Right,
what part of it is a Jewish state? What part of it is an Arabic state?
So Batzi, I mean, in terms of
go ahead.
In terms of where, innocent and just average, normal, Israelis, and then innocent civilians and perfectly normal Palestinian people should go. If obviously you like to bring up a lot of the history, but when it comes to this discussion, I mean, a lot of personally what I've realized is, when you keep focusing on the history, it really doesn't seem to get you very, very far. So in terms of where to go from here, do you see for someone such as yourself with strong opinions that history kind of needs to be, put behind you in order to move forward and have a healthy country for everyone, to live in? And I guess we can kind of direct the conversation towards where to go, going to the future.
Okay, can I respond to that, please?
Yeah.
Are you talking? Okay. Okay, it's a great point. I want to move forward. I'm the first one to say history is not a dress rehearsal. We need to move forward. Life doesn't always give us second chances. I wish you'd address that very same comment to that young man, Mahmoud, who was there last week and said, I want to go back to the place where my grandfather lived. He probably still carries some kind of a key, claiming that key is some key to some door that one of my fellow Israelis lives in. Hey, this is the core of this issue. They want to replay history. That's the very point of this whole conversation, I think, this whole conflict. Is they want to replay history, and we need to move forward.
So if there are...
They cannot have what they could have had in 1948.
Right, but so for those, I think we were playing out different scenarios last week. If people such as Mahmoud weren't interested in, let's say, replaying history as much as they were, let's say, interested in, being able to travel back to this land and feel welcome to travel back, and maybe they settle in different areas. Not necessarily they're not going to replay history and kick current Israeli citizens out of their homes. If they're trying to just be able to move back to a land where they feel like they should be welcomed in open arms, and they get the sense from the outside looking in that Israel is not having an open arm welcome to allow them to come back in. What's your response to them when they feel that sort of defense coming from the Israeli side? What do you think?
Israel is not like any other country like America or New Zealand that can have open arms to anyone who wishes to immigrate there. Israel, those people who wish to emigrate to Israel are people who hate Israel. I'm sorry not all of them maybe, but the majority of them. Just yesterday I saw Morsi of Egypt saying he's not going to negotiate with pigs. And would you say that's a way of me, someone calling me a pig or a monkey? I don't think so. You're welcome to have that as a compliment for yourself. I would not take it as a compliment. He doesn't tell me that same very person who wants to move to live with me loves me. And growing up in Israel, I can tell you, I think I shared with you last week, from a very early age, I heard throw me into the sea, trying to turn Israel into a Judenrein. And I'm sorry I'm using a German word, but it's the most appropriate word I can find to describe the reality that they wish to turn the Middle East into. With all due respect to any beliefs or any human beings, a nice person like Mahmoud, I don't trust these people. I am sorry, and nobody can accuse me or blame me of the way I feel.
Right. So like Corey, quickly, if you don't feel comfortable answering the question, you don't have to. But are you Jewish by any chance? Because then we can kind of play. We can kind of go back to your story. Are you Jewish, Corey?
I am. Yeah, I am.
All right.
Actually, can I respond also to the
yeah.
question, or do you want to?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think there's a few things, but Sion is absolutely correct. You cannot go from. If you speak to the majority of Palestinians around the world, who are actually much more moderate than the majority of other Arab countries, but the majority of Palestinians are anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and claim not to be anti-Jewish. But they want to go back to 1947. They want to go back to the original homes. They think they still exist. They don't. They want it to be a Palestinian country with Palestinian culture, and they completely look past the fact that there is an Israeli culture here, and it's thriving and dynamic, and they want to replace it. They might let us live here, but they don't. They want to come back. I think one of the things I've noticed is that the whole thing about the refugee thing, the multinational refugee thing, which only Palestinians claim, it's a really fun to. I don't know why they keep trying it on Jews, because every Jew is a refugee. My grandparents were thrown out of Russia and the Ukraine, literally thrown out, and they lost everything. I can't go to the Ukraine or Russia and ask for the original house. I have no idea where it would be, and I don't want to. Because we as Jews, we were thrown out of every country, and it was just that was normal up until about 60, 70 years ago. people became refugees, and they moved on, and they went to other places. I don't want Palestinians. At the same time, I also have a lot of empathy for Palestinians who have tied their culture to this land and have and are very afraid of losing their culture. I mean, they're sort of the way where the Jews were 2,000 years ago when we were thrown out of this land. So on the one hand, we should each have a lot of sympathy for each other, but for the past 100 years, Palestinians have been actively, very verbally against everything Zionist and Israeli and Jewish, and violent towards Jews. And because we have a history of other people being violent to us, that's not something that Jews will put up with. It's not something Jews are willing to accept. Having someone who claimed, I will kill you to come back to my home, and then they have the expectation that we will welcome them with open arms. It's impossible. It can't happen.
Batzi, do you have a response? Otherwise, there's a question. Someone asked a question.
We agree on that, Corey, don't we?
Say again, Batzi?
Yes, absolutely.
No, I said Corey and I both agree on that.
And I agree, and we agree, and I don't just. It's not just an emotional. As a Jewish person, and I understand the Jewish need for self-determination. Absolutely, that's the other part that most Palestinians or Arabs don't seem to understand. But we have a need to feel we control our destiny. It's not just that. Also, from a purely objective conflict perspective, you cannot suddenly bring in 4 million people into a country of 7 million, 8 million now. It's absolutely impossible. On cultural grounds, economic grounds, create another Yugoslavia where we'll be killing each other. Right. And that's the last thing that anyone here wants.
So here's just I asked you before, Corey, about a question about being Jewish quickly, because I wanted to play just a role in kind of bringing up an example. So you moved into Israel 20 years ago, and a lot of people from the other side would say, you had no problem immigrating into Israel primarily because you're Jewish. But then you have people such as Mahmoud who, seem like perfectly normal, 20-year-old individuals, and he's living in Jordan now, I believe. He's Muslim, but he's saying he'd like to return to his land. So I guess what I want to understand from both of you is, like, if people such as Mahmoud weren't, insistent on moving back to their exact same home that their grandparents lived in or whatever, but rather they just wanted to move back to the land in general, do you think that there's some flaws, and perhaps, I guess I'm just going to throw it out there, is there any sort of racist laws that are coming from, or at least the Israeli government is communicating by not, let's say, allowing Mahmoud to freely move back into the country versus someone like Corey? What are your guys' takes on that?
Well, there's two things here. First of all, every country has the right to decide who immigrates to their country. So I can't just, even though my grandparents were from Russia and the Ukraine on one side, I can't just go there and say, I demand to move there and to live in Russia or the Ukraine. I can't do it. In Germany and Japan also have similar laws that people who left, their great-grandchildren, up to many generations, are allowed to claim German and Japanese citizenship to go live there. It's allowed. I'm not allowed to move to Japan, but my friend who is half Japanese, he is. Is that fair? Is that racist? There's an element of racism, I mean, in a sense, but I don't see it as being... every country has the right to decide who they are, and as long as the actual citizens of the country don't feel... The issue is if they feel that they are not dealt with fairly on a day-to-day basis. People from the outside, and I do make that cut. I know Mahmoud doesn't, and Palestinians don't. I make that cut to 1948, because that to me is the starting point. It happened. People left. People were thrown out. It was a war. It was horrible. It's 60-something years ago. It's time to move on. The other part of that is exactly. there isn't a way. If Mahmoud and Palestinians had 60 years been saying, I just want to be an Israeli, I love the Israeli people. I would love to live in Haifa and in Tel Aviv and to go to and understand Jewish culture and to integrate Palestinian culture into Israeli society. If that had been how Palestinians had reacted 60 years ago, from my humanistic type worldview, I probably would have been absolutely supportive of the idea of Palestinians coming back. That is not the case. The case has been hatred, violence, and destruction. And so they made their bed. I don't know what else to say. Maybe it's not fair, and part of me sympathizes, but that's the situation. And I'm not going to put my son at risk for Mahmoud to feel, to realize his dream.
Excellent points, Corey. I agree with most of what you're saying. I would like to go back to the issue of 1948 and the refugees. There was a war, I agree. Show me one war in the world which is fair and just. Show me one war that doesn't have some victims who suffer from it. However, show me also one war that has perpetuated one group or another of refugees. The Palestinians have assumed a role of perpetual refugeedom, if there is such a thing, okay? It's almost become an hereditary thing with them. And why should they be singled out? They could have solved the problems of refugees like any other refugees in the world have solved. More recent wars have had refugees, Rwanda, Sudan. Do you hear much about them? Do they go around the world bombing people and accusing everybody of their problems? No. Why is the world letting them get away with it? Why are we letting them get away with it? And to give back the example of letting people move freely to Israel, there were some efforts made at some stage to reunite families. There was an Arab woman who married a guy from Judea and Samaria who is a Muslim, and I guess he will call himself a Palestinian. And he moved to Israel when he married that woman. You know what the first thing he did once he moved to Israel, Max, and I'm sure you know about it, Corey? He bombed a bus in Tel Aviv. I mean, you know, in Hebrew we have a saying, I don't know how you say it in English, but if you get burnt by hot water, you're going to be very careful with cold water. And this is the stage where Israel is at. They wanted Gaza. We gave them Gaza. We really gave them Gaza. We gave them a very possible, great potential for a fantastic economy. What have they turned it into? A city of tunnels. And not tunnels to bring the country up, to improve its economy, to help it. A tunnel to only create more havoc and more destruction. I'm sorry. If you ask me to trust these people now, I'm going to have a very difficult time to do it.
Right.
As
So,
with other Israelis.
so
Corey agrees with me.
Batzi and Corey, I just wanted to quickly mention, I wrote something in the text chat, but unless it's a different Mahmoud S, I believe Mahmoud from last week's conversation is inside the room right now watching and participating. So if he'd like to join, the discussion, I'm just leaving the option open for him to, do it with, one spot, here remaining. And I'm sure we'd love to have him, and we can address some of these, ideas that you've brought up, especially referencing last week's conversation. But what I was just going to say next is, so we hear, each of your, your points of view right now. What is the proper approach to take forward, Batzi? I mean, that was interesting, metaphor that you just brought up before, or phrase that people use over in Israel now. So what's the proper approach forward in terms of the solution to this conflict? Corey, do you want to go first? I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
I don't have. I don't think any solution will work. Actually, I think that the Israelis would accept a two-state solution. They would accept a one-state solution if they controlled, meaning including Judea and Samaria and West Bank, but only if Israel controlled. They would not accept a binational country because it will turn into Yugoslavia, they said, or they would lose all control of security, which is a very real issue. I don't see on the Palestinian side. If you go to Palestinian cities now, there are posters everywhere saying our right to return is our right to our heritage. I forget what the actual posters say. It's everywhere, and this is through the PA, the Mahmoud Abbas, keeping this. And I have to say, it's a fantasy alive. So I don't see when hopes are so high that Palestinians are somehow going to realize this dream of going back to 1947 Palestine, going back to these homes which don't exist anymore. I don't see how any solution will actually solve the problem, and I actually think it'll probably morph into just a different type of conflict. Like I said, type of Yugoslavia or Beirut or something like that. Having said all that, I will personally accept any solution that the majority on both sides can live with. I personally don't care that much, other than I love Israeli culture, actually. Even though I'm Canadian, I'm not really Israeli. I love living here. I don't really want the culture to change. I don't want the mentality to change. I really love it here. But any solution that the majority could live with somehow, I'll support.
Right. Okay. Go ahead, Batzi.
Okay. I agree with you. I mean, it needs to be solved. We cannot continue like that. And it's interesting because last week I attended a conference in Jerusalem. It's called, it was dealing with sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. And of course, it was mostly the right wing organized it. And a few alternative solutions where all of them were, of course, in agreement that we should make it part of the state of Israel, Judea and Samaria. And the question is, once we do it, if we do it, because right now it's still disputed territories. For anybody's information, or everybody's information, these areas, Judea and Samaria, are no man's land. I'm sorry, I know people live there, but it was occupied by Jordan until 1967, and if we go back to history, I know people here don't like history, but historically, international law is on our side as far as Judea and Samaria are concerned. But we need to move forward, and if Israel decides to annex the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, I'm slipping into your vocabulary, Corey, which is very bad right now. But in any case, if Israel decides to annex Judea and Samaria, we do need to decide what to do with these people. It's a very unfortunate situation. To tell you that I want another state next to me, especially when I hear how Abbas is becoming bed partners with Hamas in the last couple of days. I mean, it's been going on back and forth. But when I know what Hamas's goal is, I'm not too encouraged by what I hear. And to think that there's going to be a state next to me with airplanes flying into Israel, being in the range of missiles, I'm not interested in it at all. So naturally, we do need some kind of security, but not the kind that we received after leaving Gaza. And frankly, I was in favor of moving away from Gaza. I didn't think we had any business being there. I do think we have more business being in Judea and Samaria, but if the governments, the world decide on some kind of a solution that keeps Israel's security. I don't care about anything else, guys. I'm telling you right now, and I know I don't sound politically correct, but I'm Jewish first, and I care about my Jewish people. I care about the security of Israel, and these are the first two things that I would look at. The rest of the world has taken care of itself. I need to take care of my people, and that's where I'm coming from, and that is my view into the future.
Great. So I guess, I mean, I have two things that I would, be interested in bringing up. One relates to, I guess, Corey, can I get your take on, when you did these interviews with Palestinians, what was like, when you would interview them, I'm assuming you'd bring up questions such as like, what's your opinion on the idea of, let's say, Hamas having in their constitution that they want Israel wiped off the map? And then I'm sure you would ask Israelis, what's your opinion on, innocent Palestinian civilians in either the West Bank or in Gaza, being killed and by the thousands. So could you give us a sense of what their, I guess you could take each one individually, what their responses would be to, these sort of hardships?
Well, I didn't actually have those questions. They're not, other than I think one or two that I made sort of humorous. All the questions came from other people,
Okay.
so I don't choose the questions, and some of them might seem kind of bizarre when I was asking them. But I think the question, a person asking a question is asking for a reason. So even if it sounds a little strange to the other side, it's answering something for them. About the Hamas charter, no, I didn't have anything like that. And sorry, what was the second one?
Asking Israelis about, Palestinian civilians being killed, by the thousands.
I think it would be very. Oh, hold on.
Oh. What the fuck just happened? What the fuck just happened?